Hey guys, I came across this video and in light of recent events, especially with this new administration and the increase in racialized aggression towards non-white people, I just wanted to point something out. I used to be an admirer of Tim Wise. In fact, I was impressed with his ability to recognize and articulate the nuances of racism in the United States specifically. Obviously, that was early in my understanding of what racism is and what white supremacy is. But this video of Tim Wise speaking at a college was taped in March, I believe March 24th of 2017. So it's fairly recent. It was done this year. And I noticed several things that he mentioned that I found very disturbing. He goes to great lengths to downplay racism and white people's ability to change, or that they are able to change, rather. And I just wanted to point this out because during this video, he mentioned a few things that I had some questions on. One, as he says, he believes that most people are good. Now, that is a fairly common sentiment, but somebody who studies racism and gives speeches on it, obviously racism isn't good, but it is this culture. It is the culture that we live in. So how can you have good people in a bad culture that are practicing racism and mistreating people because they're not white? So I'm confused about that. So my question to Tim would be, can you define what is a good person and what would make a good person a bad person? I need to understand exactly what the distinction is, because I think the impression most people have, and even those close to me, is that people are born bad and they look bad and they're just malevolent and they look like the devil, which is not true at all. I don't believe anybody's born bad. I believe they develop into bad people because they're conditioned and they're seduced to do bad things. And good people resist the temptation to do bad things, at least to do them repeatedly or willingly or deliberately. So that's my definition between a bad person and a good person. And Tim, who's very skilled and a very polished speaker, should be able to articulate that as well. So I'm kind of curious if he could respond to that if he has an opportunity to watch this video. He also mentioned that with the police as well, saying that there's good police and there's bad police, but the good police, if they speak up, they get knocked out of the force. So they're having to remain quiet and just go along to get along and maintaining the blue code of silence. Well, if they're doing that, if their actions don't distinguish that, they're not going to accept that behavior, then aren't they by definition bad as well? I mean, if you can't claim to be good but do bad things, I mean, I have a real problem with that. Your intention doesn't mean anything, it's your actions. I mean, at least that's the way I see it. If anybody can point out the flaw in my logic, please feel free. Also, he said that he does admit that the majority of white people are not going to stop supporting white supremacy, which, I mean, I can appreciate that small factor, but he does give you the impression that a significant percentage won't. You know, he doesn't specify exactly what that is, but he makes it seem that it could be significant, which I don't believe that at all. And I would challenge Tim Wise to provide any evidence that anybody that classifies themselves as white is willing to work against white supremacy, not just talk, tweet, or write, but actually work against it. Also, he doesn't define white supremacy and racism as a system. I don't think that anybody leaving one of his speeches comes to a clear understanding that it is a system and it's supported by a group of people who classify themselves as white. I don't think he makes that clear so that people have a clear understanding. And if you don't clearly define it, then you can't really combat it, because you need to know exactly what the problem is in order to fix it. Proper cure requires proper diagnosis. And the last thing is, if you are non-white and you're watching this, you will get the distinct impression that people that classify themselves as white are redeemable, that they can be converted from practicing racism to not practicing racism, which is not the case at all. You can become aware of your own racism, but you're not going to stop practicing it without resistance. So he gives the impression that white people or those that classify themselves as white are redeemable, and there's no evidence to that effect. In fact, he was asked, there was a request that he actually provide a disclosure, which he said is accurate, and I'll read it to you. I am Tim Wise, and I am a racist white supremacist, meaning I consciously and or unconsciously, directly and or indirectly mistreat individuals because they are not white. If you are a non-white person and you only remember one thing that I say, remember that I, Tim Wise, am a racist white supremacist. As long as the system of racism, white supremacy, exists, every non-white person should suspect the primary objective of any white person, including Tim Wise, is the maintenance of white domination worldwide. That's the disclosure that he was encouraged to give to clear up any kind of confusion with non-white people, that Tim is in fact a racist and practices racism, even though he speaks against it. He agreed that it was accurate and that he didn't have any problem with it, but he was very resistant to actually saying this in an open forum. I will include the link of the interview where he made that statement, and he agreed to it, and I want you to pay close attention to how he rationalizes and justifies not using it. There should be a clear understanding, and you can look at the evidence, look at the increased degree of racialized aggression, violence, and disrespect around the United States since 45 came into office, whether it's in the work environment, in public spaces, in school, with children. Look at the evidence on how many white classified children racially harassed non-white children after 45 was elected. And you let me know if you believe people that classify themselves as white are going to voluntarily stop practicing racism. I just wanted to include this because I think a lot of people miss the mark, and they have this idealized view that people can change without being pressured to change. So just let me know what you think. I'm going to include this video with the others, and I may follow with some others at a later point. I'll include the link of the interview and the one of this video as well, and you let me know any differences in the way he speaks at either point. Notice the difference in how he speaks to one audience as opposed to another.